investigated, and certainly in my tenure, I think that's what we've done. We can go and see what we've seen through our Industry Complaints Commission to see whether she has seen things which haven't come to us, but I don't think we're inundated by Jetstar pilots making complaints to us. Now, the reasons why they don't make the complaints to us may very well be, as you've outlined, industrial concerns for their employment or whatever. However, it's difficult for us to regulate in that space. And I think it really is for others to control those issues. If someone comes to us with a complaint, we'll investigate it. And I've given the industry that.
Sure. I appreciate that. Whilst you, yes.
If I may, I think I mentioned at last estimate, Jonathan Alec, Associate Director of Aviation Safety. I corrected the dates that I offered the first time, that as of February of 2010 and December of 2009, regular public transport operators are required to have in place a safety management system. That system is required to have in place an internal reporting scheme which provides for these kinds of reports to be made to the operator, and that the order that is a condition on the air operator certificate also provides that there may not be a punitive element within the organization for that kind of reporting. Now, the point I was making when I first raised this was that if it came to our attention that an operator took punitive action against a reporting operating member, their operating crew, under the safety management scheme, that would be inconsistent. That would be a breach of a condition on their air operator certificate. That's relatively new legislation, but we would need to be aware of the fact that this happened before we could take action on it.
No, thank you. But in terms of other recommendations that were made, in terms of an ancillary finding was a potential of unacceptable fatigue risk for cabin crew. You don't have the regulations to, at the moment, CASA doesn't regulate for cabin crew fatigue, does it?
No, that's correct, we do not.
And you can't say whether you've been instructed by the government to prepare regulations along those lines?
Obviously, Senator, if there's government policy involved, I can't comment, but we are awaiting the fatigue risk management guidelines from ICAO. Captain Woodward mentioned those. They're actually due to come out very shortly. We're expecting them next month. The compliance date for that, what's called the SARP, Standard Recommended Practice, is expected to be November this year. We will implement those ICAO recommendations for flight crew by that date. We're anticipating the introduction of fatigue risk management for cabin crew to take slightly longer than that, the reason being that we've never done it before, we've never regulated cabin crew times before, and we think we'll have to do a lot of consultation with the industry and the cabin crew unions and other interested parties before we produce our first ever document, but that is our intent. So certainly as soon as we get the ICAO standards, we will start work on those. And this year, if the ICAO date of next month or thereabouts is correct for the paperwork to come to us or for it to be available, we will have completed by November fatigue risk management guidelines for flight crew, but I would anticipate the cabin crew being finished sometime next year.
Sure. Thank you for that. One of the issues that's been raised, Chair, I know, I really need to refer to the document. Yeah, I really need to refer to the document once we've got it. That one of the findings made in this audit was that while about workaround to deadheading, while not illegal, it is a further demonstration of how to maximise a system to meet operational needs, and that was the company policy to pay for some flight crew to commute between other cities and Darwin has a potential to significantly increase fatigue risk, and also there was, I think, one of the other findings made reference to, you know, I guess pushing the envelope in terms of turnaround times and the like. Is that something that's been attended to since this report?
I'll speak, I guess, just for Greg Hood for a minute. We did raise with Jetstar the issue of the split standby duty, which is what appears to me they were using here. The difficulty that we always encounter is that CAR 48 and the exemptions to it were written a very long time ago in a different world, and they never were contemplated as tools for managing fatigue risks as we understand it today. Certainly, in my own experience, I've involved in the ICAO rewrite or the attempted rewrite of fatigue risk management earlier this century. You know, we were unable to actually reconcile a lot of those things at that time, and that's now underway under the leadership of Dr. Curtis Graber, and that has been rewritten now, and they're the documents we're waiting to see. Up till now, we have a system that says this is the minimum that you have to give people. It's prescriptive, whether it be a minimum standard of hours or, in the case we're talking about here, a minimum standard of time off or whatever. But when it is a minimum, it's there for a very good reason, in that that is the lowest that you can show acceptable safety and acceptable compliance. So the minimum is not necessarily dangerous. But in the commercial reality of these operations, I think it's pretty self-evident that all these carriers these days look to go to the minimum. They look to go to where they get the most commercial advantage. Now, in previous days, perhaps, everybody exceeded the margin or the minimum by quite an acceptable standard. With, I'd say, what's happened worldwide, there's been a continual move to squeeze profits out of everything that's possible. I'm not criticising Jetstar here, please, you must understand, or any Australian airline for that matter. However, they push to the minimum, and the basis, I guess, in reality is the minimum is the acceptable. Now, whether it's best practice is another question.
Against that background, should the minimum be raised?
That's the question, Senator. I think we will see that prescriptive, we're getting away from a prescriptive limit of just saying because you have 10 hours off, you've got to be rested. We're going to saying, oh, what is the activity? What have you been doing? You know, what are we intending to do? As I said, I've had quite a bit to do with this on a professional basis, and in fact my master's thesis was in fatigue risk management, so I'm not claiming to be an expert, but I do have a little bit of background theory to this. Most of the biometric type testing of FADE or SAFE or any of these are not reliable indicators of fatigue. But the primary idea of fatigue is that it comes in two forms. There is acute fatigue and there's chronic fatigue. Acute fatigue is what you might get working in the garden and flying too long or whatever, or hard duty, but within the limits. And that is recovered only by one means, and that's rest. Chronic fatigue is, of course, a medical condition, which is not treated by rest, as the rest alone. So in some respects, fatigue risk management systems address the issue of acute fatigue on the basis that the person is rested to do the next duty they're intended to do, not recover from the duty they've just done. So that's an interesting area of how that is contemplated and how it's actually used in practice. But the whole idea of the fatigue risk management system is to try to prevent people winding up with chronic fatigue. And that, of course, is a movable feast, dare I say it. But I'll say again, there's no reliable science in the world at the moment where you can come out with a number and then say that is your fatigue risk, you are this, you are that. There's always some subjective nature to it.
On that issue, the Independent Transport Safety Regulator of New South Wales, with their transport safety alerts 34 of July last year and 35 of January this year, in relation to the use of mathematical models of human fatigue, was fairly critical of the FADE system, saying that you know, I don't know if you're familiar with the ITSRs. Is that something, even though it was in the context of train drivers, is that something that you take into account, that criticism of the limitations of the FADE system?
I don't know whether the ATSB wishes to talk about that, but just a couple of seconds from my point of view, Senator, would be that, yeah, the FADE system, I think pretty much over the last, say, 8 to 9 years, has been shown to not be a reliable indicator of fatigue. There are medical tests you can do to show fatigue by checking on enzymes, etc., but they're fairly invasive. But I'll hand over to my colleagues from the ATSB. They may wish to put some more expert knowledge to it.
Yeah.
Well, I think Mr McCormick is more of an expert on fatigue than I. What I will say, Senator, is I'm aware of the ITSA work, which relies on research work from the rail regulator in the United States. And what it says, as I understand it, essentially is that in the most crucial area, systems like FADE are not particularly reliable. At the extreme end, either extreme end, well rested or severely fatigued, works fine, tells you that there's a problem or there's no problem. But the very area in the middle, the stuff you're trying to manage the risk, is where numerical systems do not give you adequate reliability, and you've got to find other means for managing the overall risk. And that's the issue that ICAO has been trying to deal with, and any set of standards is going to have to deal with. It's the uncertainty we have to deal with when we're assessing whether fatigue is a contributing factor in an accident or an occurrence. It is a complex area, and there's sadly no easy answers in finding a way through it.
Can I just go to Senator O'Brien has asked witness today, I think, a very pertinent question. In the US, Congress has passed legislation that limits, that has, I think, time limits as to whether, if you're working for a regulator, working for industry. And I think there's different views on that. I think there was a different view from Virgin, from Mr Borghetti, a slightly different view compared to one of his senior executives in maintenance who thought it wasn't a bad thing. The CAO exemption, Order 48, is dated the 18th of September 2009, and it's signed off by Mark Rossiter, who is the manager of CASA operations and air transport for the southern region. That's your understanding?
Yeah, that's the document you totally said.
Yes, yes. Mr Rossiter subsequently is now the head of safety at Jetstar. Are you aware when he got that position?
As you correctly point out, and thank you for that, Senator, Mark Rossiter was the manager of CASA operations air transport. On the 5th of October, he moved from that position into the safety oversight branch.
Right.
And then on the 6th of December, he left CASA's employment, 6th December 09.
To take up the position?
Sorry, 6th of the 10th, 6th of October
2010.
2009.
Must be 10. It must be 9.
Must be 9, 2009. I'll stand by that, 6th of December 2009.
So within 3 months it shifted to, or a bit under within less than 3 months it shifted to Jetstar, is that right?
6th, it's from the September to the...
Yeah. That's... Yeah.
Correct.
So it was a bit under 3 months.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to... But does CASA have any views on that as a general rule, given what's occurred to the US? I mean, you've got different views. You've got Virgin saying, people within Virgin saying something different, but is that something that causes you any concern?
Yes, Senator, if I could use the vernacular, it's not a good look. You know, we're very cognisant of the fact that the skill sets that we need in our senior managers, like Mr Rossiter and others, are very much the skill set that the industry looks for as well. So we're competing for the same people. And in a place like Australia, it's a very small pool. And in fact, even to go overseas, it's surprising the number of people that, if you've been in the industry, you know they're in the industry in other countries, because people tend to move around like that. And I think we saw that earlier today with Virgin Blue, new AOC responsible person. We are very cognisant from a governance point of view of what people are doing. At any time someone indicates to us that they are going to leave the organisation from a senior position to go to someone else in the organisation, or in fact through anywhere, that would be a conflict of interest condition.
So when did Mr Rossiter advise you that he was going to Jetstar? Do you know?
Me personally...
Or CASA?
I don't know whether we have record of that.
Well, presumably he would have given notice that he was leaving.
He would have given notice, but when exactly he gave us that notice, I'm not sure, Senator.
Is there a requirement